The world has been in uproar since Trump came into power for the second time in just a few days. Trump has changed so many things that the world has gotten used to, including withdrawing the US from the Paris Agreement and suspending U.S. foreign aid. The recent executive order which Trump has issued and has caused ripples across the world is the suspension of funding for USAID. While almost everyone has criticized Trump's move, there is one African leader in the Sahel region that doesn't mind Trump's decision. In fact, you can say that he applauds Trump's decision. This leader is none other than President Traoré of Burkina Faso. Traoré sees Trump's decision as a way for African countries to be independent and self-reliant. This is why he has recently made certain moves to increase rice production in Burkina Faso. In this video, we are going to show you the progress Burkina Faso has made in rice production, explain what USAID is all about, and highlight what Traoré thinks of President Trump's decision. Let's get started. Under the order of President Traoré, the governor of House Bassin, a region in Burkina Faso, Madame Mariana Kate, paid a visit to the wheat field located in the developed plain of Basin on Friday, January 31, 2025. The ongoing work proved all that President Traoré has been saying. All this while Burkina Faso and other African nations do not need financial aid from the U.S. or any other nation right now. Burkina Faso is on the verge of making history with its wheat and rice field, which after production has the capability of achieving rice self-sufficiency. The wheat and rice plants here are not just growing, they are flourishing, and it's all thanks to Traoré's massive investment in the sector. When he first came into power, Traoré spoke deeply on the need for Burkina Faso to achieve food security. You see, Burkina Faso, like other African countries, has fertile land for rice production, but despite this, for a long time, Burkina Faso has been among the top importer of foreign rice. This is because rice is a staple food in the country and the demand for it is high. However, for President Traoré, importing rice when the country has the land to produce it is not a smart idea, so he decided to do something about it. In 2024, President Traoré personally handed over 20 optical swords to rice mills across the country at the Regional Directorate of Agriculture in HS Bassin. The equipment, valued at 180 million CFA excluding taxes and acquired by the National Office of Major Projects, is intended to improve the quality and competitiveness of locally produced rice. Speaking at the event, the president emphasized enhancing rice processing capabilities. We are officially handing over these swords to you for the benefit of cooperatives and valiant rice producers, so that the rice is of very good quality. We hope to eat rice free of all impurities from now on, he said. Before we proceed, here is a reminder to like this video, drop a comment, and subscribe to our channel so that you can get more videos like this. Dr. Abdur Rasman Katie, special advisor to the president on agricultural issues, described the equipment as strategic for boosting national rice production. National rice is not competitive in part due to the low sorting capacity, which affects the quality of the finished product, Kate said. He specified that these sorters are the latest generation optical sorters with a capacity of 64 million megapixels, capable of sorting all impurities and calibrating rice grains. The 20 machines vary in processing capacity, with some handling 1.6 tons per hour and others capable of processing 4 to 6 tons per hour. Drive K added that training programs would be organized to ensure proper use of the equipment. Representing rice processors, SCU Khanate, president of the HS Bassin Rice Innovation Platform, expressed gratitude for the initiative. With the arrival of these technologically advanced machines, it is a sign of relief for us. Our rice will have nothing to envy imported rice, he said. According to him, it will give national rice production more quality and competitiveness, and the rice made in Burkina Faso will take on much more value now. It's been almost 1 year since Traoré delivered these equipment, and his efforts have begun to bear fruit. Upon her visit to the farm, which is about 450 hectares of land with 100 hectares dedicated to wheat production. Speaking during the visit, the president of the Cooperative Society of Wheat and Rice Production in the region stated that we are mobilized and available to do better. He also welcomed the government's initiatives and the support provided to producers, stressing that this first experience will allow them to learn and improve wheat and rice production in the years to come. The governor said she was satisfied with the state of the crops. I saw wheat plants and good physiognomy at the spiling stage. This is proof that the producers have followed the advice and guidelines of agricultural technicians. She said it encouraged farmers to redouble their efforts to contribute to food self-sufficiency. Now here's where it gets interesting. Lulin di Sahel, a wheat flour production plant, made it clear to the governor that they are committed to buying all wheat production for this season. This is remarkable. So not only is the region producing wheat, the factories are also ready to use the locally made wheat instead of importing from outside the music country. While there is still a lot more to be done, it is evident that Burkina Faso is on a path to food self-sufficiency. It would also Interest you to know that between 2022 when Traoré came into power and 2024 rice production increased from 280,000 metric tons to 326,000 metric tons in 2024. This is remarkable, but it's not just rice and wheat production that has seen massive improvement. According to reports, in 2023 the agriculture sector contributed 16.33% to Burkina Faso's GDP, which has increased from $18.8 billion to $22.1 billion. Tomato production increased from 315,000 metric tons in 2022 to 360,000 metric tons in 2024. Millet production rose from 907,000 metric tons in 2022 to 1 million metric tons in music. 2024. This is remarkable again. All of this is thanks to the massive investment by Traoré in the industry, but Traoré's investment in the sector is all thanks to his mindset and belief. Traoré believes that African countries should be self-reliant and independent. This is why he made an insightful evaluation of the resources God has blessed Burkina Faso with and decided to add value to them instead of looking to the so-called more advanced economies and asking for their support. This is why Traoré applauds the decision of President Trump to suspend funding for USAID. But what exactly is USAID and why are people angry with Trump's decision? Right from the beginning of his presidential campaign, Trump made it clear that he wants overseas spending to be closely aligned with his America First approach. This is why he posted on his Truth Social page last week that USAID spending is totally unexplainable. Close it down. The United States Agency for International Development, USAID, was set up in the early 1960s to administer humanitarian aid programs on behalf of the U.S. government. It employs around 10,000 people, two-thirds of whom work overseas. According to the Congressional Research Service, it has bases in more than 60 countries and works in dozens of others. However, most of the work on the ground is carried out by other organizations that are contracted and funded by USAID. The range of activities it undertakes is vast. For example, not only does USAID provide food in countries where people are starving, it also operates the world's gold standard famine detection system, which uses data analysis to try to predict where food shortages are emerging. Much of USAID's budget is spent on health programs such as offering polio vaccinations in countries where the disease still circulates and helping to stop the spread of viruses which have the potential to cause a pandemic. Now, according to government data, the U.S. spent $68 billion on international aid in 2023. That total is spread across several departments and agencies, but USAID's budget constitutes more than half of it at around $40 billion. The vast majority of USAID money is spent in Asia, Africa, and Europe, primarily on humanitarian efforts in Ukraine. This is why analysts have said that African countries will suffer as a result of the suspension of the aid. Now, President Trump has said that USAID funding is not a valuable use of taxpayer money. His administration has published a list of USAID projects which it said were evidence of waste and abuse, including a grant of $1.5 million to an LGBTQ group in Serbia, $2.5 million for electric vehicles in Vietnam, and $6 million for tourism in Egypt. But it's not just Trump that is against USAID. Elon Musk, the world's richest billionaire and a strong supporter of Trump, has also criticized USAID. According to him, the aid agency is a criminal organization and that Trump has agreed to shut it down since the executive order suspending the funding of the project. The world has been in uproar as a result of the impact of the suspension. Following the suspension, reports reveal that global humanitarian aid efforts have been disrupted, with all staff put on leave and the future of the organization unknown. But how has the suspension impacted Africa? Well, in Africa, USAID funding has majorly been used for promoting several health initiatives, including South Africa's HIV/AIDS program. Just a few days after Trump's executive order, there were reports of HIV clinics closing, scheduled training programs canceled, and trans health centers forced to shut their doors in South Africa. Within a week of Trump's return, the WIT's Reproductive Health and HIV Institute Trans Health Center closed its key populations program clinics, citing the USAID stop order. Likewise, the country's Medical Research Council had to cancel a grant-writing workshop funded through the U.S. National Institutes of Health days after Trump froze the agency's activities and funding recipients of funding through the U.S. President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief PEPFAR received notification to stop all activities, including the provision of antiretroviral medicine for HIV. PEPFAR funds HIV treatment and intervention campaigns in Botswana, Mozambique, Namibia, Uganda, and Zimbabwe, among others. Experts have also analyzed that the freeze could lead to the disruption of emergency responses to outbreaks such as Mpox and the Marburg virus. However, for some African experts, Trump's decision is a wake-up call. According to Angela E.G., assistant professor at the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation At the University of Washington, African countries will ultimately have to become less dependent on external donors and prioritize domestic funding to the health sector and efficient public finance management. This is exactly the same message that President Traoré has been preaching. African countries are too dependent on the West for everything, which is ridiculous given the fact that Africa has both the human and material resources to be self-reliant. However, Trump's recent decisions have made it clear the impact of such dependency. Imagine if African countries were not dependent on Western aid. Trump's decisions would not have any impact on Africa. Right now, African countries are left scrambling to deal with the fallout of Trump's decisions. But here is something interesting to note. Everyone thinks that Africa depends on Western aid, but that is not factually correct. No doubt there have been people who have benefited from the funding sent from the West, but the truth is that the majority of Africans have never felt the impact of the aid. This is why we believe that aside from the health sector, no other sector in African countries will be impacted by the suspension of USAID. Do you know why? It's because most of the aid intended for development and poverty alleviation ends up in the pockets of corrupt leaders and their cronies. The cycle of looting has become an institutionalized plague, depriving millions of Africans of the much-needed benefits that such funding is meant to provide. If USAID funding is being squandered through corruption, then the question arises: should the U.S. continue providing financial assistance to Africa under such conditions instead of ensuring that these resources reach the people who need them most? Corrupt government officials, bureaucrats, and elites siphon off large portions of the funds, enriching themselves while leaving the masses in abject poverty. Transparency International and other anti-corruption watchdogs have repeatedly exposed shocking cases of embezzlement, with some African leaders stashing stolen funds in offshore accounts or investing in luxurious properties abroad. For instance, several African countries receive millions of dollars annually from USAID to fight diseases like malaria, tuberculosis, and HIV/AIDS. However, reports have shown that funds meant for purchasing medical equipment and drugs are often mismanaged or embezzled, leading to a lack of essential medicines in public hospitals. The Marxist dictatorship of Ethiopia's M.H. Mariam was a major recipient of donor funds, a portion of which was used to forcibly resettle large segments of the population. Donor funds, which were earmarked for famine relief, were instead used to buy trucks for the resettlement scheme. Relief aid was also intentionally kept away from some of the most severely affected areas because it suited M's regime to starve its opponents. But Ethiopia is not the exception. The Congo also sold donated food supplies and used the funds to purchase an arms factory from Italy. The more peaceful Mauritius took donated rice, which it insisted be of high quality, and diverted it to tourist hotels. And what about most recently in Nigeria, where during the COVID-19 pandemic, palliative, which was meant to be given to the citizens, were hoarded and instead shared by politicians with people who would vote for them? The donors of this foreign aid, such as the World Bank, the EU, and Western countries, are aware that substantial amounts of the aid end up in the pockets of greedy African leaders and NOS, but yet they still continue to give the aid and consider them as partners in development. If they truly wanted Africa to develop, wouldn't they have figured out another way to help the continent? Why do they still keep on pumping aid every year when it's obvious that the aid is not doing anything? It's obvious that they are getting something from it. And this brings us to our next point. Aid to Africa is a tool of Western exploitation. Recall that 2014 report where we said that Africa receives about $33.7 billion each year. This amount is big, right? But listen to this. The report included that $91.99 billion is extracted from the continent in the form of debt repayments, multinational company profits, and illicit financial flows. Mind you, this is just for 2014. The figure is reportedly higher in most recent times. Based on this 2014 report, it means Africa suffers a net loss of more than $85 billion every year. Such a net outflow suggests that far from the West aiding Africa, it is Africa that is aiding the West. In the same way that Africa is helping to develop the West, it's the same way that the West is helping to underdeveloping aid. Most of the aid funds given to Africa by the West come with conditions. Some of these conditions include allowing foreign multinational companies to set up their companies in Africa, giving them access to exploit our resources. Finally, aid in Africa creates dependency, and this, Africans, is one of the biggest reasons why Africa should stop receiving foreign aid, because it has made Africa dependent on the West. Since the inception of aid in Africa, it has become a major source of government funding. In 2009, foreign aid accounted for between 50% and 92% of overall government spending in Sierra Leone, Liberia, Guinea-Bissau, Rwanda, Gambia, and BU, to name just a few. Imagine that every year a budget is created in African countries. Foreign aid is included as a source of revenue. Can you see why it's easy for the West to manipulate these countries to do their bidding? Because if they don't, the West can easily say, we are stopping aid from being sent to your country unless you do what we say. It's what happened to Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali after the coup took place. This means aid has become a weapon just like sanctions to be used by the West to control Africa. Aside from this, the dependency created by the aid being sent to Africa has stalled innovation and destroyed local businesses. It has weakened the local markets and dampened the spirit of entrepreneurship. Take, for instance, the corn shipped by the UN to Kenya. Recall that we said that a portion of the shipment ends up on the black market where the corn is dumped at extremely low prices. Now, what do you think will be the effect of this on local corn farmers? Local farmers may as well put down there. He's right away. No one can compete with the UN's World Food Program. And because the farmers go under in the face of this pressure, Kenya would have no reserves to draw on if there actually were a famine next year. It's a simple but fatal cycle. It's the same in the textile industry. In 1997, 137,000 workers were employed in Nigeria's textile industry. By 2003, the figure had dropped to 57,000. Why? Because so-called good Europeans pack their old clothes into a bag and send them to Africa, where they are sold at very low prices, and Africans would prefer to buy these European clothes than clothes made in Africa because of the cost. The fact is, aid has done more harm than good to Africa. It has made Africa to be seen as a helpless continent that cannot do anything to help itself. But it's time to change this. Africa can do without foreign aid. If there was no aid, Africa would be forced to find ways to create revenue by itself. It would force Africa to produce and trade with fellow African countries. It would force Africa to improve on infrastructures. When there is no free food that will be sold at low prices, farmers will have to go to the farm. Africa will not fizzle out without aid. Instead, Africa will come out stronger. What are your thoughts? Let us know in the comments section below. Don't forget to like this video, drop a comment, and share.